ink drinkers, and welcome back to the Blind Girls Book Talk podcast. My name is Eyre.
And I'm Belle.
And we are two legally blind sisters who love reading and love books. And so what we've done is we've created this show in order to talk about that. We talk about a wide variety of bookish content, and that can range from bad retellings of stories, book to movie adaptation comparisons, buddy reads, recent reads, bookish challenges. Really, the list does go on and on. And today what we're doing is we're actually going to be doing a bad retelling of Jane Eyre. So, like we said last time, we tried to record this episode once before, and it went horribly, horribly awry. So we're going to try again, and we are going to be switching it up this time. So instead of me giving the bad retelling, Belle is actually going to give the bad retelling of this, because I am not a fan of Jane Eyre.
Nor am I.
Yeah, and to be honest, I had tried to read this book, and I think I got like a third of the way through when I gave up and did not finish this book. Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting bad retelling, to say the least.
I had to read this book sophomore year. This was my sophomore year summer reading assignment for high school. And I'm going to tell you this. Jane Eyre, it has promise on the fact that it is like Rebecca, just without all the drama. And the missing drama is why it sucks.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, especially the beginning. Like, the end doesn't get any better, but like...
Yeah, well,
yeah.
With that being said, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So...
spoilers, by the way.
Spoilers. Okay, anyway, once upon a time, a baby girl's born, but her parents die.
Oh, so sad.
Oh, so sad. I really don't feel bad because her life's about to get so much worse.
Oh, okay, great.
So she gets shipped to her uncle and aunt to live with them and their 3 children. Great, whatever. While the uncle's alive, she lives a pretty decent life.
Oh, that's
because
good.
The uncle's like, I feel bad for you, so I'm going to kind of treat you as one of my own. And then her uncle dies.
Oh, it continues to get better.
It continues to get worse. And he dies of course he dies like in the house, because olden days, you die in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And so her aunt is then left in charge of her and her cousins. Her aunt and her female cousins, her 2 female cousins, they're little witches. And then her male cousin, he's just a little demon spawn. And they're very mean to her. At one point in time, I forget exactly what, they deem she did something horribly wrong, so they decided to lock her into the room where her uncle died in. And then she, freaks out and thinks she sees a ghost. I think she passes out at one point in time. And that's her punishment, and it's this whole big thing. Whatever. They're horrible human beings. And then, I forget what his actual title is. I think he was a minister of some sort. And he shows up while Jane is living with her aunt still. And he's just like, I run this boarding school for, troubled children. And her aunt's like, I have one of those. She brings him to meet Jane. I know there's a huge, long conversation about this. But Jane's like, yeah, I want to go to school. I want to learn. And her aunt's like, great, that gets rid of you. So then she gets shipped to boarding school. And honestly, it's female correctional facility school. It's really weird. The school part is just weird. And while she's at the school, she makes a friend. Yay! Everything's turning around for Jane. Then her friend dies. Her friend gets sick and dies. So yep. Jane has, no friends anymore. But she stays at that school until she's, 18. She stays on as a student, and then she kind of becomes, an unofficial teacher. But then they're like, okay, yeah, you need to leave. And she's like, well, what the heck am I going to do? They're like, well, you're a woman. Like, go find a governess position. And she's like, okay. And so she finds an opening for governess position at Thornfield?
I don't know.
I think it's Thornfield.
Something.
I think it's Thornfield is the name of the estate. And so the housekeeper hires her as a governess for the master's young daughter named Adele. She travels there. She meets the housekeeper, who's a very sweet lady. The housekeeper's like, oh yeah, master's not here. He's doing whatever the heck he does. We don't know. He's a mysterious gentleman. And she's like, okay. And so she meets Adele and they click and they become besties. And she like teaches Adele all this stuff, which is really helpful because Jane can speak French and Adele is French. And like the housekeeper can't really speak French. So like the girl has like no one to talk to. But then Jane shows up and she's like, oh, look, someone I can talk to. And so you go through, I think it's like a couple months or something. And on one of her days off, because apparently a governess gets days off, she is going into town to mail a letter. And as she's walking to town, this guy on a horse is riding in with a dog. He's riding up to go like to the path, like to the house. And she spooks the horse somehow. I'm really not sure how. The horse loses its mind and pretty much bucks off the dude. Dude falls. Dude breaks his foot. And like she's like, oh my gosh, sir, can I help you? And he's like really mean to her. And he's like blaming her. He's like, this is all your fault, blah, blah, blah. He's like, what the heck are you even doing here? And she's like, I'm walking into town. And he's like, but where did you come from? And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm the governess at Thornfield Hall. I can run and get some help. And he's like, forget it. Just bring me my horse. I'm done. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you. And she's like, okay, whatever. Gets him on his horse. He, like, continues on his way to the estate. She goes to town, does her business, and she comes back, and the housekeeper greets her. The housekeeper is just like, so Jane, guess what? The master has finally returned. Except he had an accident with his horse, and he broke his foot. And he's asking to meet you. And Jane's just like, well, oh, crap. And so she goes, and, like, he asks for her portfolio, and, like, she brings it to him, and he looks at, like, her paintings and drawings and, like, and all of her nonsense. And they have, like, a conversation. She's just kind of looking at him, like, trying to, like, understand him. And he's just like, do you find me handsome? And she's just like, no.
No, I like my version better. My version was, tell me I'm pretty.
It's legit. It's just like, do you think I'm pretty? And Jane's just like, yeah, no. Like, no.
Jane's like, absolutely not. And it's great.
Yeah. So that happens, and he's just like, oh, rude. But moving on. So some weird stuff is happening in the estate. Like, one night she saves Mr. Rochester, the dude who owns the estate.
Wait, is his name Rochester?
Yeah, it's Rochester. That one I'm 100% sure on.
Are we sure on this?
Yeah, I'm 100% sure.
I'm not sure on this.
I'm 100% sure.
Wait, I'm getting the other Bronte novel man.
Are you on Heathcliff?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's Wuthering Heights,
Yeah.
which also sucks. But anyway, it's middle of the night. Everyone's asleep. And Jane wakes up to the smell of smoke and, like, goes to Rochester, and his bed curtains are on fire.
Yeah.
So, like, they fix it and everything, and Jane's just like, are you okay? And he's just like, forget this ever happened. We're fine. And she's like, what? But don't you need more help? And he's just like, no, go to bed. Like, we're not dealing with this. And so she thinks it's this maid that is doing it. And, like, she tries to talk to him about it, and he's like, no, forget it. And then some time goes by, and then he's like, guess what? I have people coming over. He leaves, and then he just shows back up with people. Don't know why.
No one knows.
apparently they're his friends. But he shows up with this one lady to Jane, like the housekeeper's like, that's going to be the mistress of the house. And Jane's just like, okay, whatever. And what's her name? Blanche?
I think. I don't know.
I think that's her first name. They're having like parties and stuff, and like Rochester's like, Jane needs to be involved. And Jane's just like, leave me alone. But like then he calls her down for like a dinner something. And then Rochester like steps out for a second or something. And then a butler comes in and he's just like, so a fortune teller came and she wishes to tell the fortunes of all the young ladies in the room. And so all of the rich ladies are just like, oh, yay. So, like, they send people in. I think, like, Blanche comes out crying.
Something. I don't know. It's real weird.
I forget. It's real weird. And then Jane's, like, just sitting by the window, like, just ignoring everyone's existence. She's like, I'm just here because I'm forced to be. And so then the butler comes in, and the butler's like, the fortune teller says there's another lady here. She needs to be sent in. And everybody's looking around like, who the heck are they talking about? Like, that was all of them. And the butler's like, nah, this lady is adamant that there's another. And then, like, somebody moves, and then they see Jane in the corner, and they're like, does she mean the governess? And the butler's like, well, apparently, like, because that's the only other female left in this room. But then, like, everybody else, all these rich people are losing their minds because they're like, what the heck would this fortune teller want with this governess? Like, this is stupid. But Jane's just like, do I have to? And the butler's like, yeah, you got to. So she goes, and they have this weird talk. Like, honestly, like, it goes around in circles. Like, it means nothing. The fortune teller starts laughing. Turns out it's Rochester.
Yeah.
And she's just like, sir? She sees through it, and he's like, of course you'd see through my game, something. And she's just kind of looking at him like, what the heck is wrong with you? But, like, he had his fun, whatever. So then some more time passes. Most of the party leaves, but, like, some still stay behind. And Rochester goes and is talking to Jane. And he's like, take a walk in the garden with me. And she's like, okay, whatever. And they go for a walk. Rochester is saying, so I'm going to be married soon. Jane's just like, okay. And then he's like, I'm going to propose to Blanche. Jane's just like, okay. He's just like, so that means we're probably going to be sending Adele to finishing school. Jane's response, okay. And Rochester's like, so that means there'd be no use for you here. Jane's response, I would guess so, Rochester. So I'd have to find you a new position. Jane's response, okay. He replies with, I'm probably going to have to send you very far away. Jane's response, okay, cool. His response, gosh darn it, Jane loved me.
Yeah.
Jane's just like, what? And so then Rochester is like, I love you and all this other blah. And Jane's just like, okay. And he's just like, well, do you love me? Like, I don't even think she says yes or no. I believe Jane's response to most things in this book is just, okay. So he's like, so you're gonna marry me, Jane. Okay. Because this girl is nuts. And so next day, like, they, like, announce their engagement, and, like, they go into town, and, like, Rochester just gets 10 times worse. Because he's just like, I want to decorate you in all the fine jewels and pearls and diamonds, and you'll shine brighter than the moon. And Jane's just like, well, that's stupid. And Rochester's like, no, it isn't, my little pixie or something. And I'm just like, dude, I liked you better when you were pretending to be a fortune teller. He takes, like, Mrs. Bennet's level of cringe and just intensifies it. And Jane just matches it on the whole, okay.
Okay.
Like, there are times where she's like, this is wasteful. Like, don't do this. And he's just like, no. And she's just like, okay. So, like, they get her a wedding dress and, like, all this stuff. And then fast forward to their wedding, and they're at the church, and everybody's just like, oh, so excited, it's a wedding. And then, as, like, they're getting ready to say their vows, his best friend comes barging into the church. And he's like, I object! And everybody's like, what? And the priest is just like, why do you object? And the best friend, Mason, is just like, because he's already married.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And everyone's just like, is it true? And Rochester's like, I will show you this so-called wife. So they go to the estate, and then they go to the attic. And he opens the door, and there's the strange maid from before that Jane thinks causes all the issues. Also, in the room is a mad lady. Like, completely lost any sense of anything. And, like, she's violent and all this stuff. And he's like, see, this is my so-called wife that I was tricked into marrying, but I'm stuck with her now because divorce isn't a thing, but I don't want her. And can't I just have one nice thing that is Jane? And can't we all just deal with it? And they're just like, yeah, you can't marry her. Rochester starts throwing a hissy fit, and then Jane runs away and locks herself in her room. And then she goes to exit her room and finds Rochester just creepily sitting there waiting for her to leave. And, like, he grabs her and he's just like, look, we may not be able to get married, but, like, we can run away and we can, like, live together and everything. Like, be pretty much married without the name of marriage. Or, if you want, we can live as brother and sister, like, this whole thing.
No, he does not say that.
Yeah, he does.
Because I stopped, like, around the point in time where he was just like, I'm going to give you diamonds. And she's just like,
no.
But no.
He gives her the option to then go live as brother and sister.
I don't like this man.
No, he's just like, anything, I'll do whatever you want, Jane, but, like, you can't leave me. And Jane is just like, look, I got a lot to think about. And I was like, this was at the one point in the book, and I'm like, oh, look, Jane actually knows something that's not okay. And she's just like, I need time to think. Like, legit, this is the I don't know phase that Jane now goes into. And he's like, okay, we'll talk in the morning. And he's like, but please eat something, like, you know, you didn't eat all day, whatever. And she's like, okay, fine. So, like, he goes to bed, and then, like, in the middle of the night, she just runs away. She's just like, yep, I'm going to run away from my problems. And she's, like, running for, like, a couple weeks. Like, she did steal some food. And, like, eventually she finds herself on a doorstep of a brother and his two sisters living together. And the brother's a reverend. And so they take her in and they heal her. Whatever. So she is there. And she hears the siblings conversing about their uncle who died. Well, their uncle left everything to their cousin, but their cousin is missing.
Is this the biggest Deus Ex Machina that I'm going to see in my entire life?
Probably. So I forget exactly how it comes out, but this is how I remember it. So Jane's like, well, who's this cousin? And they're like, well, her name is also Jane, but her name is Jane Eyre. And Jane's just like, oh, that's my name. And they're just like, cousin?
Cousin?
And apparently. And so, like, she gets, like, all this money and stuff. And, like, inherits all this stuff. And, like, she's like, a nice, well-off lady now. Like, she's living. She don't need no man. And then her cousin, I believe his name is St. John.
St. John?
I think. It's Saint something. I think it's John. It's John or Paul, but I'm pretty sure it's John.
I like St. Clair better. His name is St. Clair.
Sure, we're going to name him St. Clair. But anyway, St. Clair is pretty much just like, Jane, marry me. And Jane is like, I'd rather not. And he's like, but please. And Jane's like, really, I'd rather not. And he's like, well, I need to leave to this place to do mission work, and I want you to come with me. And Jane's just like, sure, I'll come with you. But he's like, but the only way you can come with me is as my wife. And Jane is just like, yeah, no. And then I think he leaves, and, like, she's with the sisters. And then she hears Rochester calling her name, and so she runs outside and starts yelling his name back. But, like, he's not there, and it's just the wind. It's really weird.
I hate it.
I do, too. But then she's just like, I still love this dude. And I'm just like, girl, no. He is a walking red flag for everything.
Girl, bye.
Girl, bye. Girl, no. Just don't. Learn to say no. More than just to your creep of a cousin. But anyway, she like talks to her cousins, and she's just like, I need to go. And they're just like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah, but is there anything I can do for you? And they're just like, no, we found some work, so we'll be fine. Just go. Promise to write to us. Don't think we're strangers. We're family. You have family now that actually likes you. So she travels back to Thornfeld, and she, like, gets into town, and she asks about it. The worker's just like, lady, that place burnt down. And she's just like, what? And he's like, yeah, it burnt down. And she's like, what happened to everyone? And he's like, well, you see, everybody was mostly fine, but there were some casualties. And she's just like, what? And he's like, yeah, so apparently the mad woman that the master of the estate had locked in the attic, that was apparently his wife. Did you hear? This wasn't found out until, like, he was going to marry this other young girl. And Jane is like, okay, do tell me more. And he's like, yeah, he, like, fell in love with this young girl. And so they were going to marry, and then found out that he was already married and locked his crazy wife in the attic. And then the young girl ran away. We're all 100% sure she died. And, like, that, like, tore up everybody, apparently, at that place. And Jane's just like, no, really?
No, really. Do tell.
Do tell. And he's just like, yeah. But anyway, so the crazy wife escaped and just burnt the place down.
Shock.
But Rochester was able to get everybody out. Sadly, though, like, when he went to go back to save his wife, trigger warning, flashes, sounds, sirens, trigger warning now. But when he went to go up, his wife was on the roof, and he went up to save her, and when he got up there to save her, she jumped. And as Rochester was running down the staircase, the upper staircase collapsed on him.
Oof.
He got severely injured in the accident, and so he's blind and physically handicapped. So, yeah. And she's like, well, where can I find this dude? And he's like, well, I'm not really sure. I think one of the servants and his wife took him in. And she's like, okay. And where can I find them? And he's like, well, they have, like, a house a little bit further down the estate. You know, that type of thing. And Jane was also friends with these people, and she's like, okay, well, I'll go visit them. Well, she goes kind of to the estate, sees it in complete just
ruin
everywhere. And then she sees the worker that the dude mentioned, and he sees her, and he's just like, Jane? And she's just like, oh, hi.
Oh, hi.
And he's like, am I seeing ghosts now? And she's like, why does everyone think I'm dead? And he's like, well, let's see here. You did, like, just run away in the middle of the night with, like, nothing. So, you know, we're all gonna assume you died. And she's like, yeah, no, I'm alive. And she, like, kind of asks, she's like, well, how is he? And he's just like, you mean the master? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, struggling. But he brings her in, sees the wife. The wife is like, oh my God, it's Jane! And Jane is just like, sup. And so they're talking and stuff. And then Rochester rings the bell for, like, water or something and to light the candles. And they're like, yeah, he can't see anything, but, like, he still really likes the candles lit because apparently he can see light. And she's just like, okay, well, I'll go deal with him. The servant is just like, are you sure? Like, he's a ghastly sight. And Jane's just like, well, he was a ghastly man, so And I was just kind of like, girl, you're right. You're right. Yeah, he was. And so she goes in, and like, honestly, I find this part kind of sweet. So she comes in, and his dog starts barking. Rochester kind of yells to the dog, like, hey, cut it out, whatever. And she, like, does what he wants and stuff. But, like, he's trying to talk to her, and she's not responding. And he says something, like, he gets really concerned. And he's like, wait a minute, it's not this, it's not you. And she says something in return, and he, like, freaks out and, like, grabs her hand. And he's just like, who is this? And she's just like, well, Pilot, that your dog knows me. The 2 servants know me. So do you. And he's just, like, feeling her hand, and he's like, these are my Jane's fingers. And he's like, my little pixie, you're not dead. But she's like, yeah, no, I'm alive. And she's like, pretty much it's dinner time, and she's like, have you had dinner yet? And he's like, no, I don't take dinner. And she's like, well, I do, so you are eating. Well, I do. And he's kind of a grump about it, but they go and eat. Like, she gets him to the table, and they, like, get food. And so they're sitting there, and she just looks at him. And she's like, do you have a comb? And he's like, why? And she's like, because, sir, you look horrible. And he, like, starts to, like, chastise her. And she's like, no, like, you obviously have not combed your hair in a hot minute. Like, you look ghastly, and it is a not savory sight to see. And I can't stand it. So, like, give me your comb. And she, like, makes him look better. And she's like, oh, look, you actually look presentable now. And, like, it's night. And she's like, okay, well, I gotta go. And, like, he freaks out. He's like, no, you can't leave. And she's just like, I'll be back. Like, chill out, dude. I don't know why you freaked out. And it's like, I wonder why he's freaked out, Jane. Not like you haven't run away in the middle of the night from him. You know.
True. The trauma is real.
His trauma is real. And so she leaves. And then she shows up the next day. They kind of start a routine where she'd go on walks with him and, like, get him out and, like, do stuff with him and everything. And, like, the one walk they take, she started, like, talking to him about what it was like outside and everything. He asks her something because, like, she told him about his cousins. And she's like, oh, yeah, he wanted to marry me. And Rochester was like, really? And she's like, yeah. And he was like, well, what did he look like? And she's like, oh, he had, like, blonde hair and blue eyes, very tall, quite handsome, like, that type of thing. And Rochester gets real mad. And he's like, yeah, go back to your husband. Forget about me. Just go. And she's just like, well, if you want me to leave, I'll leave. And he's just like, just go. So she, like, goes to leave, and then he's like, wait a minute, no, don't go. And she comes back, and he's like, did you marry him? And she's like, no, I turned him down. And he's like, oh, but why?
But why, though?
And she's like, because he wanted what I couldn't offer. He says nights ago, he was, like, outside at night, and, like, he just started yelling her name. And it's the same night that she heard him, to, like, his voice. So, like, it's really weird.
I hate it.
I do too.
I continue to hate it.
I do too. And then so she's like, well, I'm not leaving you. And he's like, okay. And she's like, I guess you haven't heard. I'm a well-off woman now. And he's like, okay. And she's like, so we can legit go wherever we want. Because, like, in the fire, he pretty much lost everything. And she's like, we can go wherever we want. We can live as brother and sister, like, whatever. Or, you know, I can be your nurse, like, whatever. And he's just like, well, I don't want a nurse or a sister. I want a wife. And she's like, well, I can also be that too. And he's like, really? And she's like, yeah, okay. And so the book ends with, reader, I married him. And then they went and got, so everybody's probably like, well, where was Adele? Like, this daughter that he had. Adele was at boarding school. They go and pick her up from boarding school and bring her home. And Jane's like, I'll teach her and I'll still have time for you. It'll be fine. And Rochester's just like, okay, fine, whatever. She marries him, and then they do have a child, and he gained enough sight back in his cloudy eye because he just had smoke damage. But a lot of it cleared up so that he could see their first child.
Aww.
Yeah.
But
then it like, that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's legit it.
That's legit it.
I hate it.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's a stupid book. No offense to anybody who likes the Brontes. I don't. I dislike Jane Eyre. I hate Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, I haven't read Wuthering Heights. I don't want to.
I tried. I couldn't. Like, I got so frustrated. I don't like them. You can't make me. No. I can't even remember what that book was used to even teach.
Jane Eyre?
Yeah.
I didn't read it, so I couldn't tell you.
I honestly don't even remember what I was to learn from that book. Which is sad, because as much as I hate Metamorphosis, I know what that book was used to teach me. Jane Eyre, I can't, like, I don't even remember. And, like, I understand how some people could like this book. Because, I mean, it does hold the argument that it is one of, like, the first feminist books.
But see,
because it uses the quote, pretty much, I'm not a bird, no cage, or net shall ensnare me, that type of thing. And I'm just like, that's not...
Like, okay, I can see it, but also, like, if that was the case, she would not have gone back to Rochester.
No.
Do you know what I mean? I can see where, I guess, like, the bones would be for that, but also, like, if it truly was, she would never have gone back.
And, I have to admit, I like some of the parts. Like, I like the whole reader, like, talking to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Because the book does have, like, some of that. But, like, that's the only thing that I really liked about that book. This will honestly probably be one of the last Bronte episodes we do.
Yeah, I think so, because honestly, like, you don't enjoy it, I don't enjoy it.
Brontes suck. No offense to anybody who likes them. I can't. I can appreciate that they're made.
This is our opinions.
Yeah, nobody come for it. Actually, if you want to argue this with me, I will argue it. I will argue there are so many better classical authors than Bronte.
Honestly, I'm more Switzerland in this because I have no horse in this race.
All the people who like them, someone explain to me the appeal, please.
Fair. All right. Well, I think that about does it for this bad retelling of Jane Eyre.
I want to be done.
Of course, if you like this episode, if you like what you've been listening to, please consider sharing the episode with your friends and following the podcast. It would really help us to grow the show, and we would appreciate the support those actions would give. Now, what are we going to be talking about next time?
Do I have that book challenge?
Oh, okay. That should be fun then. So, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.